Episode 56 LD November 7, 2023. NYT Climate Forward and Environmental Justice Newsletters Excerpts. New York Times. November 7, 2023. A win and a warning ahead of COP28 Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity and relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. Last year, the annual United Nations climate talks ended with an agreement to compensate poor countries for destruction from climate disasters that have been made worse by emissions from wealthy nations. Last weekend, some of the key provisions were hashed out at a meeting in Abu Dhabi. Under the agreement, the fund would launch next year, initially housed at the World Bank, and developing countries would have a seat on its board. Global leaders will be asked to ratify the plan at the United Nations climate talks known as COP28, which start later this month in Dubai. Rich countries, which have burned most of the fossil fuels that have warmed the planet, according to this agreement, will help the poor countries that bear the least responsibility for pollution, but will suffer the most from climate change. An unsatisfying deal. There was almost no loss and damage fund at all. An effort to hash out the details of the fund last month in Aswan, Egypt, failed when negotiators hit an impasse. That forced countries to reconvene at last weekend's emergency meeting in Abu Dhabi. Developing countries were pushing for more concrete commitments and more specific language, and rich countries, including the United States, were trying to keep the final agreement non-committal. The U.S. unsuccessfully tried to insert language that said contributions to the fund would be voluntary. The U.S. delegation ultimately signed on to the final agreement, but immediately undercut it with comments that called into question its commitment. The fund will be housed at the World Bank, which is leaning into its climate work under new President Ajay Banga. Many developing countries are still waiting for hundreds of billions of dollars in financing to shift to clean energy and build protections against climate change that wealthier countries promised more than a decade ago. Rich nations are wary of accepting responsibility for climate damages, fearful that they could face unlimited liability. And while the United States and other industrialized countries are increasing their use of renewable energy, they continue to expand their fossil fuel production. Why a low-carbon economy is better for people and nature. A rapid energy transition is essential to mitigate climate change. Other climate news. Lavish tax credits and trade protections are finally reversing a long decline in solar manufacturing in the United States. In keeping with tradition, King Charles III, a vocal climate advocate, gave a speech to Parliament outlining the priorities of the Prime Minister, which include, this year, more fossil fuel extraction. Electric school buses, which have big batteries and spend much of the day parked, may help utilities store solar and wind energy to prevent blackouts. An electric planes test voyage from Vermont to Florida may foreshadow a new era of battery-powered air travel. Nigeria's decision to end fuel subsidies is kickstarting solar energy projects to replace dirty diesel generators. Facing setbacks for wind farms, the Biden administration said clean energy projects were still on track to meet its goals for 2025. Offshore oil has made tiny Guyana the world's fastest-growing economy, but some locals fear their country is becoming a subsidiary of Exxon. Rich countries have signed a series of deals with emerging economies to help them switch from coal to clean energy. Environmental Justice Newsletter November 7, 2023. Staying connected, important announcements excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity and relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. Biden-Harris administration announces nearly $2 billion in available funding to increase climate resilience nationwide. On October 12, as part of President Biden's Investing in America agenda, FEMA made $1.8 billion available for 2 grant programs designed to help communities increase their resilience to the impacts of climate change, including increasingly frequent and extreme weather events. The Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities (BRIC) annual grant program is making $1 billion available for projects that protect people and infrastructure from natural hazards and the effects of climate change. Community Disaster Resilience Zones, CDRZ, designated by FEMA last month, by coupling data from the National Risk Index with the Climate and Economic Justice Screening Tool developed by CEQ, can receive increased financial and technical assistance to plan and implement resilience programs. For example, CDRZ are eligible for BRIC grant funds at an increased federal cost share of up to 90%. Designed communities are prioritized to receive BRIC direct technical assistance to support their project proposals. The Flood Mitigation Assistance (FMA) program is making $800 million available for projects that mitigate flood risks facing homes and communities across the nation. The BRIC and FMA programs each aim to advance the administration's Justice 40 initiative, which set the goal that 40% of the overall benefits of certain clean energy, climate and other covered federal investments flow to disadvantaged communities that are marginalized by underinvestment and overburdened by pollution. Biden-Harris administration opens low-income communities bonus credit program for clean energy projects benefiting underserved communities. On October 19, as part of President Biden's Investing in America agenda, a key pillar of Bidenomics, the U.S. Department of Energy, DOE, U.S. Department of the Treasury, and Internal Revenue Service, IRS, announced the opening of applications for the Low-Income Communities Bonus Credit Program, accepted through November 18. This program, supported by the Inflation Reduction Act, addresses the need to expand access to cost-saving clean energy projects in underserved communities through a groundbreaking tax incentive for solar and wind projects across the country. Fact sheet: Biden-Harris administration announces investment to bolster nation's electric grid infrastructure, cut energy costs for families, and create good-paying jobs on October 30. As part of the Biden-Harris administration's $30 billion investment in grid infrastructure, the largest in history, DOE announced a new $1.3 billion commitment in 3 transmission lines crossing 6 states: Arizona, Nevada, New Hampshire, New Mexico, Utah, and Vermont to deliver affordable, reliable power to households across the country. To ensure that transmission build-out is done efficiently, the Department of Energy today released the final National Transmission Needs Study, which provides insight into where the grid and American communities would benefit from increased transmission, by assessing current and anticipated future capacity constraints and congestion on the nation's electric grid. Staying connected, opportunities for you to engage. Under President Biden's Investing in America agenda, EPA to host a national virtual open house from November 6 to 14. Registration for the event is now open. On November 6, EPA kicked off the Community, Equity and Resiliency Initiative with a national virtual open house that is open to the public. This virtual open house provides space for community partners and potential grant applicants to learn about the Inflation Reduction Act and other Investing in America programs and talk about how community-driven partnerships can take advantage of multiple funding opportunities to inspire meaningful, positive change in their communities. This 6-day event will include a series of virtual panels. Topics will include climate change in rural communities, technical assistance, and more. Click here to register for the National Virtual Open House.